But we got through the entire process with no furloughs, and we were able to then meet the demand when it came back, and it's recognized around the world as the most successful COVID relief anywhere. It also happens to be the only industry that didn't grow in inequality during the pandemic. So I'm Sara Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants and labor leader.
Yes.
And a lot of people would say that it's pretty strange that a labor leader and a CEO would be sitting here talking about a great thing that we did together. But who are you?
I'm Doug Parker. I'm the retired chairman CEO of American Airlines.
So Doug and I had actually known each other going into the pandemic for almost 20 years. And when the pandemic hit, we had both been around during 9/11. We both knew very well what crisis looked like and what it would look like for the airlines, for all the workers, if we didn't do something right away. And so I had actually put together a plan with some of Elizabeth Warren's policy people on March 13th as everything was starting to shut down. We got that over to Chairman Peter DeFazio, the chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in the House. And it was for a payroll support program, a pass-through of government funds to the airlines, but then directly to workers' paychecks. It had a lot of other features to it as well. A cap on executive compensation, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
A ban on stock buybacks, and also some other provisions too that ultimately didn't make it into the bill, but seats on corporate boards, a restriction on what could be done in a bankruptcy, all kinds of things. So we put that all together based on our experience from 9/11. And presented this to Chairman DeFazio, who took it to Nancy Pelosi. I got a call back, that was a Friday, I got a call back by Sunday saying that this was going to be the baseline for the Democrats in the House for the COVID relief. And then what happened?
Yeah, well, we airline executives were working ourselves on a plan, a slightly different plan. But similar in that people had stopped flying, and we didn't know how long it was going to be until people were flying again. What we knew was, we couldn't keep continuing to fly without some help, so we needed some government help. We were working on a plan to do that, and working at our lobbying group, A4A, Airlines for America. We're all there working, and we come up with a plan that's largely, give us a loan, yes, but also give us some straight relief, a grant, for lack of a better word, that we would use to, and in return for the grant, we agreed we would not be laying people off, is how we'd structured it, and thought this was a really good idea. Thought it'd be okay with our labor leaders. We get back some language that has all sorts of provisions about all these things that also we're going to need to agree to, like, never fight a union kind of stuff. So anyway, some of my colleagues in particular found that to be just completely unacceptable, and I was really concerned that this was gonna fall apart. And anyway, the moral of this story as we get through it all is how the two of us working together got to where we actually had a bipartisan support. But you can see how it doesn't happen. I mean, we just read language and we were like, okay, these guys, we can't agree to this, and people were ready to go home. Not so much go home, but just realize, okay, all we're going to do, we're going to get loans. Had we gotten the loans, which we would have, we'd have all taken the money and shut down our airlines, and probably not flown again for, at the time we thought it'd be a few months, but given how long it was till vaccines came, it probably would have been close to a year before airlines were flying again. No telling what that would have meant to our country, to commerce, to all sorts of things. But instead, I at least, as Sara said, knew Sara and knew that she was probably I knew she was more impactful in this than anyone else, than any other labor leaders. So I just called her and said, what are you guys doing? She
This was Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So after, so everything was moving very, very quickly. Doug called and he said, we have a problem. We're not getting any traction on Capitol Hill. And I said, well, yeah, that's because everyone hates the airline industry. And and we had a little bit of back and forth, but finally I just said, well, why don't I come down there? And he said, great. And on my way down there, I realized I'm a single label leader driving down to Airlines for America, where there were at least 6 CEOs and several staff members, and I was alone. This is sort of unheard of, but got into that boardroom. And the first thing that I would say is that I recognized right away that Doug and I were the only ones who had been there for 9/11, who were also in that room. There was also a lot of, I think people were not recognizing the moment and really understanding what was at stake here and what was going to happen. I mean, they knew it was bad, but they didn't fully understand. And so anyway, we had to go to the side and talk because there were a lot of emotions going on. And so Doug and Oscar Munoz, the CEO of United Airlines, who at least understood the moment, I think, really well, went to the side and went through a whole list of these items. And what ultimately happened was that night we agreed on the trunk of what this plan would be, which was the grants for the payroll pass-through to keep all the aviation workers on the job. This was going to cover 2 million workers, so it was even outside. It was all the contract workers as well. Keep people on the job. That would keep people connected to their health care. The government didn't have to become the HR solution for the entire airline industry. This was 2 million people where the government could interface with a few airlines and a few contractors. It ends up being about a couple hundred. But, and they could interface with them, and it would continue to make sure that people were getting paid, to continue to make sure that we were getting our health care, our continued retirement contributions, and that we were continuing to pay state taxes, because while the federal government has the ability to issue more currency, the state and local budgets are restricted by whatever taxes they can bring in. So we actually were able to help together to help both parties understand that this program was going to pay for itself. And then Doug actually came up with an additional provision in the middle of this to say that we can also guarantee that we'll continue to fly to each of the communities where the airlines were previously serving. So that became another part of the bill that was really, really important because we could then argue that not only was this going to cover a certain sector and keep it in place and be ready to meet the demand again when it took off, but also that we could continue to provide the critical support during COVID that got personnel in places where we needed to be, where there needed to be relief, where we were able to bring the medical supplies and everything else. So that was for 6 months. We had to renew it 2 other times. We had to work really hard together to do that. And what we essentially did was, for the most part, I took the Democrats, Doug took the Republicans, our teams worked with us too. We used the power of all the airline workers. We could actually communicate with everyone together. You were sending messages to the workers that were the same that the union was sending, which oftentimes those are competing views, and it was those joint messages and that joint plan that allowed us to get this done. All of the issues that his colleagues were mostly concerned about, we said we're going to agree to the trunk of this and we're going to agree to disagree to everything else. And what we had to help people understand was, look, when it gets down to the end of it, Mitch McConnell's never going to allow these provisions to go on there. You guys can calm down about it, and we're going to make sure that we keep these provisions because we knew that the Democrats had accepted this as the plan. So we had all of that in place, and we sort of kept everybody calm, and then kept arguing. We were already able to show the success of the program. So when we got around to the second and third times, there's a lot of colorful stories to tell about that. But ultimately what we got was 16 months of payroll support That was not the entire payroll. It was about 50% of the
Right.
costs for the airlines. But we got through the entire process with no furloughs, and we were able to then meet the demand when it came back. And it's recognized around the world as the most successful COVID relief anywhere. It also happens to be the only industry that didn't grow in inequality during the pandemic.
Yeah, so a couple, that's all accurate. A couple of things I'd point out. One, again, when Sara talks about how she just said, okay, I'll come over there, that is not a normal kind of union leader behavior. It took real leadership on her part to say, look, this is really important, which I was trying to stress to her. She's like, okay, we'll come work on it. So she did, which, thank goodness that she did, because I can't stress enough that without that leadership, we would have ended up with airlines getting loans from the U.S. government and shutting down airlines for several months, if not a year. That is absolutely positively what would have happened. That didn't happen because she showed that leadership. The other point that I saw that was really important, I described how we were working on a plan that sounds like the same thing. We said, give us a grant. If you give us, in exchange for the grant, we will agree to not lay anyone off. Sara's language was so much, it essentially is the same thing. It was so much better written. It was payroll support. We call it PSP. We'll say that a number of times. So the payroll support program. And instead of saying, give us $25 billion, which is what we were asking for, she went and added up what we paid as airlines over the course, over a 6-month period. And it happened to be a little bit more than $25 billion. And that's what the request was, to pay us to pay our people. And so while it was a similar amount and while it was the same thing, we agreed not to furlough people if you pay us. It was so much more elegant, because that indeed is what the government was doing. They were paying us to pay our people that we weren't going to do otherwise. We were going to furlough all of them. So that payroll support program made it so much better to go talk to people about. It wasn't a grant from the U.S. government and we were agreeing to not furlough people. It was the government's paying us to pay our people. But again, that was her work, not ours, and not a nuance. That was enormous. So that helped us get it done. That helped us get this bipartisan agreement. You left out a big part of the story, in my view, which is we were, this is a Republican administration, and there was a bill that went to the floor, and it got through the House and went to the Senate, and that bill had language that was entirely alone, and so we'd lost, even though we had worked this out amongst ourselves. Republican administration said, no, we're going to put this bill forward without that PSP language. We're going to give you $50 billion in loans instead of $25 billion in loans and $25 billion PSP. So we'd lost, but Sara didn't let us lose. She made sure that Senate didn't pass it. Anyway, it didn't get through Senate. This multi-trillion-dollar bill. One of the largest reasons, and the last thing that was negotiated, was our $25 billion PSP program. In the middle of a COVID crisis, a national crisis, what she was able to get done is make sure that thing wasn't going to pass until our people were taken care of. So anyway, thank you. Anyway, my take on all this is, one, amazing leadership, but two, these elected officials of ours that we all get frustrated by because they won't work together, they'll work together if we work together. Mm-hmm. I had a U.S. senator in a moment of candor say to me once, I'm in favor of whatever's going to happen. Just tell me know what's going to happen. That's what I'm for. And we told them what was going to happen. They want to get stuff done, but they can't. They have to stay within their constituencies. But if their constituents agree to work together, then they can work together. And we gave them permission to do that. Yeah. And that's how it got done. And we got to a point where, by the second time we went through this, the PSP program. Again, now we're in election year of 2020. and it's really hard to get any legislation done, but we almost got done, and we had bipartisan support just to carve out that PSP program and have it extended. Another, because it was going to expire October 1st of that year. And we had at least 60 votes every time Sara.
I say 80.
Every time Sara went on TV, she made the number bigger. But it was. I know we had 60. We had all the Democrats, and we had a letter signed by like
23.
12 or
23.
Okay, whatever.
Republicans.
80. We had 80 votes.
In
whatever.
fact, I had to go on Squawk Box the next day and explain why it was a good thing that saving jobs was going to make the stock price go up. I think it's the first time in history that actually increasing jobs or saving jobs as opposed to getting rid of jobs made a stock go up. And I remember Andrew Sorkin was very upset about that was just really unfair to the rest of the companies. But we argued successfully,
Right.
and we actually, what we found was that oftentimes, because we were talking to each other, we knew more than the people in government knew. Because we would get off the phone with our various constituencies and share that immediately with each other and our teams, and people started calling us. We had leaders calling us and asking us what's happening, asking us if a bill was going to get done. And we created so much energy around this that actually we were able to get that second round of relief that included, that we were just, again, a small piece of, but we were able to drive the importance of getting this done, which then created enough momentum to get relief to the rest of the country. And I'll just say one other thing, that when then the third round was after Biden was sworn in as president. And I do remember that your group and the leader of A4A said, well, it's your job now, Sara. But I would say, while it took many, many, many phone calls and letters and all kinds of things, it did just take one phone call to Joe Biden to extend it. So
Yes.
yeah, but then what this also did was this froze in time. Instead of having a crisis and having 20 years of austerity after 9/11, that also led then to a pilot shortage because because there were cuts in pay, there was termination of pensions, and parents were telling their children, don't get into aviation, it's a terrible business, and so that was hard to hire people, and there was no hiring. So in an effort to actually create diversity among the ranks in aviation, which badly needed more women, more people of color, we had 20 years of not really being able to act on those things because everything had been frozen and because things were so bad. So in this crisis, we kept everything frozen, and then we were immediately able to start working on improving conditions for workers, improving the conditions of the entire industry. And you're working on, as a retired CEO, exactly this. Tell us about your initiative.
Okay. Thank you. Since my wife and I started a nonprofit called Breaking Down Barriers, designed to help underrepresented, high potential people become airline pilots. I learned through this process. We're going to get pilots. The airlines are going to find pilots. It's a great job, and it pays very well, and the economics will take care of itself, and there will be enough pilots over time because the job is such a good one, and there are enough qualified people will get themselves qualified to do it. What I learned, however, is there are a lot of barriers to some people to doing that. It's expensive. It's $100,000 to get training to be a pilot, and there's not much support for that. You can't get a government loan like you can for college. And some people just aren't. There are awareness barriers as well. So anyway, we're working to break down those barriers and allow other high potential people who have barriers in their way have the same opportunities that those that don't have the barriers in their way have. And so we're excited about that. We're off and running with our first group of students who are doing a great job, and they're going to be pilots one day. It's very cool.
And from my perspective, we did have those 20 years of austerity, But we have been through a round of negotiations to dramatically improve the conditions for aviation workers. And last year, all of the pilots got deals that were significantly more, around 40% increases and other improvements, including a lot of things that we've been trying to work on for a very long time, such as being able to take maternity and paternity leave. And we just got a deal with American Airlines, the flight attendants, for massive improvements. So the other thing that I would say is that now we're able to move forward on improving the industry, making this a place that's attractive to work in, and also continuing to create an industry that actually shares the wealth so that we can contribute to our communities and make the whole place better. So,
perfect.
Any questions?
I think we're out of time, but anyway, I think it's an amazing story and one that I'm proud to be a part of, and that I do think I know there's a lesson here that is, because of, a leader who was willing to go work with the other side.
Two leaders, goofball.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyway, because people were willing to work together to get something done that would that allowed bipartisanship. That's how you get bipartisanship. If we had just asked our elected officials to fight our case, we would have ended up exactly where the airlines were ending up, which is not even talking to each other. But we got that done, and I know there has to be other examples like that. So my only point here is, if you're frustrated with what's going on with getting legislation done, you're going to be frustrated and figure out a way instead to go work with the other side, and which I know sounds crazy, but it works. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.